So, let's talk about a revolution, but not one fought with armies. This one was kicked off by artists. It's an amazing story, really, about two friends, one shared vision, and a single book of poems that completely changed how we think about literature, about nature, and even about ourselves. Let's get into it.
I mean, think about it. How do you actually start a revolution? You're probably picturing massive protests, grand speeches, maybe some historic battles, right? But sometimes the biggest revolutions, they start with a whisper.
And for these two poets, William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, it all started with their collaboration on one small book, a collection of poems that ended up being the literary shot heard round the world, basically signaling that one era was over and a totally new one was beginning.
Okay, so to really get why their book was such a bombshell, we first have to take a look at the world they were pushing back against. This was the superstructured, really controlled world of neoclassical poetry. Welcome to the age of rules and reason.
And you can see the battle lines drawn so clearly here. On one side, you've got the old guard, neoclassicism. It was all about logic, strict rules, and this very polished, kind of fake language that was all about the rich and powerful. And on the other side, boom, the revolution, romanticism. This was all about raw emotion, wild imagination, speaking like a real person, and focusing on everyday people. It was a complete 180.
I mean, think of the neoclassical mold as a kind of creative straitjacket. Poetry was supposed to be clever, rational, and, teach you a lesson. It used this fancy language nobody actually spoke in real life. And the heroes, they weren't farmers or kids, they were dukes and generals. Wordsworth and Coleridge saw this and just thought, there has to be something more, something real.
And the two guys who were going to deliver that change, well, they were the perfect team. Two friends with this incredibly powerful shared vision. You can think of them as the poet of nature and the poet of imagination.
And what a team they were. You had Wordsworth, the poet of nature. He was the grounded one. He saw absolute magic in the lives of regular people in the countryside, and he was adamant that poetry should use the language really used by men. Then you had Coleridge, the poet of imagination, the dreamer. This guy was off exploring the supernatural, the mysterious. He's the one who coined the phrase willing suspension of disbelief to get us to go along on his wild rides. Together, they covered the entire spectrum of what it means to be human, from the mud on a farmer's boots to the craziest dreams in your head.
Their whole collaboration, this amazing partnership, it all came to a head in one critical year. A single moment in time that became the definitive turning point for all of English literature. And that year was 1798. Seriously, if you remember just one date from this whole explainer, make it this one, because this is when the old world of poetry officially started to crack.
So, in 1798, they published their book of poems, Lyrical Ballads. And get this, they published it anonymously at first. This wasn't just a collection of nice poems. It basically became the unofficial manifesto for an entire artistic movement. It was the birth of English Romanticism.
And in the preface to a later edition, Wordsworth just lays it all out. He gives poetry this whole new definition, and it's a famous one: the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin from emotion recollected in tranquility. Just let that sink in. Poetry was no longer about following rules or being witty. It was about pure, authentic, powerful feeling.
So what were these new rules? Well, actually, scratch that. It was more about the new freedoms that made their work so absolutely revolutionary. And it really all boiled down to 4 radical changes.
First, they completely flipped the script on who poetry was even about. All of a sudden, humble farmers, shepherds, even little kids, they were now worthy subjects for the most serious and profound art. They held up the common person, saying that real truth wasn't in some palace, but out in a field. This one act basically democratized literature forever.
Next up, the language. They just threw out all that ornate, stuffy, poetic jargon from the old days. Wordsworth was especially passionate about this, insisting that they use the language that people actually spoke. This wasn't about dumbing things down. It was about making it real. It gave poetry a punch and an immediacy it just didn't have before.
The focus also did a complete 180. It shifted from the outside world inward. For the Romantics, your personal feelings, your imagination, your own unique experience, that was the ultimate authority. And where did you find truth? You went to nature. For these poets, nature wasn't just a pretty picture. It was a teacher, a moral compass, and a source of the sublime, that incredible feeling of awe you get standing in front of something huge and powerful.
And finally, they gave the poet a brand new job description.
You have to remember, this was the age of revolution. The American and French revolutions were fresh in everyone's minds. Inspired by that spirit, they saw the poet as more than just an artist. The poet was a prophet, a visionary who could see the truth. They believed poetry had a moral duty to champion liberty, justice, and reform.
The ripples from that one little book in 1798 are, well, they're still massive today. Wordsworth and Coleridge didn't just write some good poems, they literally helped shift Western culture from an age of reason to an age of imagination.
You can really see how the idea just spread like wildfire. First, in 1789, you've got the French Revolution setting the stage with all these new ideas about liberty. Then, bam, 1798 lyrical ballads drops and provides the artistic spark. That lights the fire for the next generation. You know, the famous ones like Keats, Shelley, and Byron. And from there, the movement just explodes across Europe, changing everything from painting and music to the way people thought about the world.
So if you take just one thing away from all this, let it be this. 1798 is so much more than a date in a textbook. It's the moment our culture pivoted. It's when we turned from looking outward at society and all its rules to looking inward at the incredible power of the individual mind, the human heart, and our own imagination. That shift pretty much defines the modern world we live in.
Which, it leaves us with one last question. In our own time, an age that's so defined by data, by algorithms, by technology, where can we still find that romantic spirit? Where is the wonder, that reverence for nature, that spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling that Wordsworth and Coleridge fought for over 200 years ago? It's definitely something to think about.